Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, Tuesday we have a big election, and we're going to have an election preview. But first, the Speaker of the State House of Representatives joins me, and I'll be interviewing him after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Bryan Cutler. He's been on the program before. He represents the 100th District, House District. And look, we had Governor Wolf on, obviously a different party. The Speaker's a Republican. The Governor's a Democrat, as everybody knows. And we try to get a variety of viewpoints on the program. And we have the Speaker here to help us out. I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, I don't remember a time when we've had a more contentious election. And I'm not just talking about the candidates. We got the mail-in ballots, these 3 days, a Friday of election week. Folks have election officials to get the counting done. But the fact of the matter is, we may not know for days and maybe even weeks.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right, Dr. Madonna. In light of the court order that went directly contrary to the existing law, at a minimum, we'll be waiting 3 days for ballots to come in at this point, unless the United States Supreme Court says that the statute must be followed.
Right.
And so I think that it's at least that long, but you're probably right. It could potentially be longer. Unfortunately, I think much of that confusion could have been avoided. As you know, we passed a total of 6 bills out of the House. 1 was vetoed, 4 were signed into law, 1's currently in the Senate. But all of those had bipartisan support, and we were actively managing and working through the election law changes. I think we made some great improvements, as you mentioned, the mail-in ballots and increased access, and was proud to support those efforts. It's unfortunate that the court kind of threw a monkey wrench in here at the last minute and made some changes that were not consistent with the existing law.
Well, I'll tell you, everybody I've spoken with believes that there's going to be multiple lawsuits that could have to do with mail-in ballots. The counting, where are they? Have they been counted properly? I mean, and, election officials are trying their best. I think you would agree. Look, let's face it, they've hired additional personnel, but they can't start the counting until Election Day. And it's conceivable, again, that we're going to have multiple lawsuits. And there's another factor that plays into this as well. And that has to do with the fact that we're going to be weeks. Some say we might not have this resolved for months. I don't think it's going to take that long, but...
No, I don't think it'll take that long. We worked with many of those county officials that you just mentioned, as we made these changes and tried to increase access and ensure security while at the same time hitting the deadlines that are required in the other areas of the law. And I think they're going to do a good job. As you mentioned, they've rented space, they've bought equipment. They're going to work very hard. That'll start at 7 a.m. on election morning. And for the viewers, I think it's important to note, we've already moved all of these timelines once. It used to be you couldn't start counting ballots until 8 p.m. We moved back to 7 a.m. After the primary, we passed a bill that collected about 26 different data points. And one of the data points indicated that they would need more time, which is why we passed House Bill 2626 out of the chamber. But unfortunately, the governor had indicated as soon as it passed the House that he was likely to veto it, and it kind of truncated that legislative process.
But you made a big point. You said that, we hear the differences between Governor Wolf, a Democrat, and the Republicans. Your party controls the legislature, but yet you did have some bipartisanship, didn't you? Give me 1 or 2 of the big factors.
Oh, sure. Specific to the voting laws,
yes.
Dr. Madonna?
Yes.
Well, the first one was obviously Act 77 to begin with. That was a bill that was overwhelmingly supported by the Republicans. Only 2 voted no, and about 1/3 of the Democrats. That's what expanded mail-in balloting. We also moved the time when ballots could be accepted. You might remember in prior election cycles, you had to have your ballot submitted by the Friday before the election so that they could go out to the polling places to be counted. And we moved that to 8 p.m. on Election Day. And we made other changes, got rid of straight party voting, which I think is important because I think we should support people over politics and political affiliations. And we were one of only about 7 states that still had that antiquated practice. So we made large changes, biggest changes in over 80 years to our election laws.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a one and done because we had 3 other bills that also passed. A couple of those were unanimous. All 6 of the bills that we passed, even the one that was vetoed, was bipartisan. It had strong bipartisan support. So we did our best to work through the process.
Yeah, we're going to run to a break. I want to talk about the legislative session and the bills that you pick. We hear an awful lot about the discord. I'm a big one for talking about Mars and Venus, Democrats and Republicans, and how you folks are on different planets. But in reality, I don't think we hear enough about whatever cooperation does exist. And I think that's important given the intense partisanship and polarization that exists within the electorate. All right, we're going to run to a break. I'm going to continue my conversation with the Speaker of the House, Bryan Cutler.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. Well, Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that there's a lot more consensus and a lot more compromise than I'm a big one for making the argument about how polarized we are. But as you report, you had a huge number of bills pass, with Democratic and Republican support.
Yeah, we've had a very successful legislative session, and I think it's in large part due to the process we undertook. We started at the committee level and said if something gets out of committee, we'll give it a fair shake in caucus, which is where the 2 parties discuss the individual bills. And if it clears caucus, we'll take it to the floor. Now, I will admit that meant that sometimes I scheduled bills that I myself would vote against. We ended up passing 640 bills out of the chamber. 96.25% of those, or about 614, were bipartisan. And of those, 65% were unanimous at 413. And that's literally the busiest legislative session as compared to other complete sessions, probably in the last 15 or 20 years. And as you know, we still have a budget to finish, so that number is only going to go up.
I was just going to bring that up. After the election, you all have to do the budget. You passed a budget that covers it until November. You've funded for the year, however, the public schools and the state and the public universities, and the state has a big deficit. Now, is there going to be a push by some to raise either the sales or the income tax, at least briefly, to handle the billions, the huge debt that the state exists in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, in order to kind of give some scale, we have a $34 billion budget. It's going to be somewhere between a $4.5 and a $5 billion deficit right now based off of estimates. We tried our best to match cash flow to our expenses. As you pointed out, we fully funded education and we fully funded our debt payments because we were obligated to, obviously. Mm-hmm. And when you look at that, we're going to take a look at what those revenues are going forward. I think regardless, of who wins, I think there'll probably be more federal money beginning of next year. Right now, we still have $1 billion of the federal CARES dollars, which we will allocate. Revenues, while the estimates were really low because of the COVID impact, we've actually substantially brought in revenue over that. So revenues, collections are high. So I think we're going to piece that together for the remainder of the year. I actually think next budget year is likely to be more difficult. Now, obviously, there will be some people who believe that you should raise sales tax or income tax or pick a tax.
Pick a tax.
But the reality is we're not going to cut our way out of this. We're not going to tax our way out of it. We have to grow our way out of it by opening up the economy.
I have to ask this question before you go. Tuesday is election. The Democrats won 11 seats in the House in 2018. They need 9 to take control of the chamber, and there's questions about, how that's likely to go. I think I know what you're going to say, but what's the prospects for the Republicans holding on to the House?
I think we're going to hold on to both the House and the Senate going forward. Based off of what I've seen on the ground, I think that the elections and, quite frankly, the candidates, because it goes back to all the bills that I talked about earlier. We passed bipartisan bills in voting reforms, police reforms, education reforms, workforce development. Our candidates have a great story to tell. Our existing members have a great story to tell, and we look forward to leading in the next session on those very same issues.
Yeah, I mean, most of the seats that the Democrats picked up are in the suburbs, and some argue that as we chat right now, that the sort of competitive seats were picked up by the Democrats in 2018, so there aren't as many competitive seats. Now, you're the expert on that.
Yeah, I would agree with that analysis, because in 16, both sides had presidential turnout. In 18, the Democrat Party maintained presidential turnout, the Republicans didn't. And seats that we had barely won in 16, we barely lost in 18. I think this year, given the interest in mail-in ballots and much of the coverage that I've seen, voting interest is at an all-time high. Both sides will have a very high turnout. And I think ultimately that benefits us as the Republicans, because the Democrats currently hold 15 seats that Donald Trump won by percentages up to 44%. And by contrast, we only still hold 8 seats that Hillary Clinton won. So I think the numbers and the odds as well as the story are in our favor.
Well, look, you're always welcome on the program. Thanks for coming up. Okay, Tuesday we have an election. Actually, we've been voting. Millions of Pennsylvanians have been voting by mail. And we're going to do an election preview after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, a couple of days before the election, you would expect that we would do an election preview, and we're going to do it. We're going to take a look at a number of the important elections in the state. Joining me to do that is John Cole. He's the managing editor of PoliticsPA. You can do PoliticsPA and get on their website and read all the articles and stories and columns that appear there. I do regularly, and I hope you can. It's free, right?
Got that right.
John Cole is sitting across from me. All right, John. Presidential election. Pennsylvania is the most visited state in the union by the presidential candidates. They're virtually living here. It's considered the tipping point, meaning if you win our state, you win 270 electoral votes and the presidency of the United States. So give me an assessment a couple days before the election.
Like you said, it can't be understated how important the Keystone State really is for this upcoming presidential election. Both candidates have invested a lot of time and resources in the state. Former Vice President Joe Biden, when he made his first announcement that he was running, he made it in Philadelphia. His campaign's headquartered in Philly.
Oh, yeah.
For years, I know he was kind of dubbed as Pennsylvania's third senator. He spent an awful lot of time in the state since he announced his candidacy. He talks about his Scranton roots very often. And President Donald Trump certainly has invested a lot in the state as well. When he pulled the upset victory off in 2016. When he defeated Secretary Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania, that was the first time the state voted for a Republican at the top of the ticket since 1988. So it was a few decades, and that upset victory really helped put him over the top. And I think now all the pollsters recognize, and the pundits, everyone realizes that Pennsylvania truly is one of the most important states, if not the most important state. They're both spending a lot of time here in October. They've made so many visits. And I think one thing that should be stressed is it's not as if they're going to just one part of the state, Terry. They're spending time in the Philly suburbs, which have been trending blue. They've both candidates have visited Erie, which is one of those key battleground counties. Both of them have spent time in Northeast PA, where Democrats have previously had success, but President Donald Trump gained a lot of ground in Lackawanna and Luzerne counties.
And Northampton.
And Northampton, correct. In the Lehigh Valley is an important area as well. And then, of course, in the Pittsburgh suburbs, both candidates have spent time, too. So it's every region of the state is truly important. And, of course, I'd be remiss to not mention the Harrisburg region. South Central PA has seen a lot of visits from former Vice President Joe Biden, President Donald Trump, and Vice President Mike Pence has had his fair share of visits in this region as well.
And relatives, and the relatives of the candidates.
It doesn't stop. I mean, we've seen the Trump children everywhere. Senator Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, has been campaigning in the state. This past week, he was in Centre County and Lehigh County. All hands are on deck for Pennsylvania.
And millions of Pennsylvanians have already voted, as I indicated before. And voting in person, more Republicans looks like they'll vote in person, more Democrats will vote by mail. And then we have, as I was talking with the speaker, there's 3 days to count them. And it's going to be a wild affair before it's over.
It seems unlikely that we'll know all the results on election night, to say the least, considering the influx of voters, and we'll wait for all the results to come in. Now, the only way I think we would know is if it was a blowout victory. And I think no one's expecting a blowout victory for either candidate here.
Sure. All right. We have these 3-row offices, Attorney General, Auditor General, and State Treasurer, all 3 seats right at the moment held by Democrats. And Eugene DePasquale, the Democratic Auditor General, is term limited. He's running for Congress. But, they have commercials on, but, it's almost like these offices get lost in the intensity and the attention that the presidential election gets.
Of course, the candidates matter and what their message is. It makes a big difference. We know for the Auditor General race, it is Dauphin County Controller Tim DeFore going up against Democrat Nina Ahmad. She's a former deputy mayor of Philadelphia. Like you mentioned, so that's the only open seat of that. So in theory, you would think that that is the most chance of being the closest race, considering neither of them have a particularly high name ID across the state because neither are incumbents. However, a lot of these races really do hedge upon the results of the presidential election. I'm not saying people don't split tickets anymore, but overwhelmingly we see that people are more apt to vote down ballot the way they do with the presidential race. So I think a lot of what happens at the presidential level is going to play a big role in who wins these statewide offices again.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about Congress. We have a couple of congressional seats that are being watched nationally. And they're important for, for obvious reasons. All right, we'll be back. Congress, it's coming up.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
Well, in 2018, the Democrats picked up 4 congressional seats. There are now in our 18-person delegation to Congress, 9 Democrats and 9 Republicans. All right, John Cole, there's a lot of interest in a couple of Pennsylvania's congressional elections. Take it away.
So let's start right here. The 10th Congressional District in this Harrisburg region, incumbent Republican Scott Perry from York County running for re-election. He's going up against Democrat outgoing Auditor General Eugene DePasquale. It's been a very expensive race. Both candidates have raised a lot of money millions of dollars, to be exact.
We see the commercials, right?
They're nonstop. And the thing is, they're going to keep spending it, as before we get to the election. But that race is particularly of interest. So that's a Republican area. However, when they redrew the boundaries, when the state Supreme Court redrew the congressional boundaries, Scott Perry, who was a Freedom Caucus member, a conservative Republican, his district, when it was redrawn, got not as conservative friendly. So we're looking at an area that's Republican, but there are certain parts of the district that are trending blue. And Eugene DePasquale, having been a two-term Auditor General, he has some name recognition here. He's from York County as well. And think about this, Terry. So again, they're raising a lot of money. In Pennsylvania, 3 national ratings outlets rate the race as a toss-up. So that's Inside Elections, the Cook Political Report, and Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball all have it as toss-up. So it goes to show you that's the only race in the state where all 3 races are rated as toss-up. So that's one that I would say you have to keep an eye on election night.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting about it is that Scott Perry, Congressperson Scott Perry, is a real strong supporter of President Trump.
And I think a thing we're going to have to watch on election night will be, how does President Donald Trump perform in those boundaries? In 2016, when the current boundaries they're drawn, Donald Trump won those boundaries by 10 points, or just under 10 points, over Secretary Hillary Clinton. However, we've seen internal polls now. I know they're not always the most reliable, but it seems as though Biden is performing better than Secretary Clinton did in those boundaries. And if Biden performs significantly better, there could be I'm not saying there will be a blue wave, but if Biden has a really big turnout in this district, that could catapult DePasquale into Congress.
All right, there's one other district in the state that's getting a lot of, well, there are a couple, but one in particular is getting a lot of attention. It's the 1st Congressional District. That includes most of Bucks County. The fact of the matter is that Brian Fitzpatrick, the incumbent Republican congressman, isn't as supportive of President Trump as, let's say, Scott Perry is, mainly, I think, because of Bucks County, which, has been trending Democratic, as well as the other 3 Philadelphia suburbs. So what's going on in that district?
To talk about 2 different campaigns for Republicans, both Perry and Fitzpatrick are incumbents, but they're running 2 different campaigns. Yeah. So Fitzpatrick has to distance himself from President Donald Trump at all points because the Philadelphia suburbs have been trending blue significantly. Former Vice President Joe Biden just made a trip to Bucks County recently, boosting the Democrat running against Fitzpatrick, Christina Finello. Again, Fitzpatrick has the benefit of being an incumbent, name recognition. His brother held the seat prior to him. So again, the Fitzpatrick name is well known there, and he's made a point to all his commercials. He mentions he's an independent voice. He distances himself from Donald Trump quite often. But all the attack ads from Christina Finello are linking him to Trump because he's still a Republican, and sure, Republicans are more apt to vote with the president at the top of the ticket. So that's another race where we'll see some people split their tickets in Bucks County. They're known for that. Yeah. That's one of the only counties, I think, in the state that you will see some significant, ballot splitting. However, we'll see if Biden has a big enough victory in Bucks County, that could, again, lead to an upset victory in Finello winning that race.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more straight party voting because of the polarization. There's going to be ticket splits, don't get me wrong, but the fact of the matter is there's going to be a lot more straight party voting because of the polarization that exists.
Absolutely. I think, again, I totally agree with you. Statewide, I think you're going to see that. But Bucks County is one of the areas where maybe you'll see it a little more, where Brian Fitzpatrick won re-election in 2018 there, but yet Bob Casey and Governor Tom Wolf did very, very well in Bucks County. I think it's just an ongoing trend of where we've seen certain parts of the state where the suburbs of Philly, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg suburbs are going blue, while these other old blue-collar, old Democratic areas in Northeast PA, Southwest PA, they're going red. So we're going to see those trends play out on election night, and it really is going to be fascinating. Yeah,
it's rather complicated because the real serious problem that the president has in the state is the Philadelphia suburbs, which, as you accurately point out, are trending pretty heavily Democratic. But look, I want to thank you for coming on. Great update, and here we go. Tuesday, we'll see what happens. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.